3,000 goddesses flowed through every river and spring in the ancient Greek world. These were the Oceanids, a vast legion of divine nymphs born from the primordial Titans Oceanus and Tethys. By the end of our journey, you will know the hidden stories of these powerful water spirits who shaped the fate of gods and mortals alike. We will uncover why one of them holds the key to the most sacred oath in mythology and how their quiet power survived the fall of the Titans. What single element of nature do you feel holds the most ancient power? Their immense family sprang from the very first currents of creation. To understand the Oceanids, you must first know their parents, the primordial Titans Oceanus and Tethys. Oceanus was not a sea as we imagine it, but a colossal celestial river, a perfect loop of salt water that encircled the entire flat disk of the earth. He was the boundary of the known world, a flowing, living limit. His wife and sister Tethys was his perfect counterpart. She represented the nurturing, life-giving force of freshwater that wells up from deep within the earth. Think of the clearest spring you have ever seen, water bubbling up pure and cold from some hidden depth. That is the essence of Tethys. Their union was the ultimate marriage of waters, the source of every river, every stream, every single spring that would ever quench the thirst of the world. From this single cosmic pairing flowed the 3,000 river gods, the sons, and our 3,000 Oceanids, the daughters. This makes Oceanus and Tethys the grandparents of every freshwater source on the planet, ancient deities whose power existed long before Zeus or his siblings were even born. They belonged to an older order, a time when the world itself was still taking shape. So what exactly was an Oceanid? They were not vague spirits of the wild, but very specific divine beings. Each Oceanid was a nymph of freshwater, a living embodiment of a single, specific source. One might be the soul of a thundering river that carved through mountains, while another was the gentle consciousness of a secluded forest brook, or the hidden spirit of a single, bubbling spring. They were the personification of the water itself, meaning their life force and the health of their water source were one and the same. This sets them apart from another famous group of water nymphs, the Nereids, who were the 50 daughters of the sea god Nereus and were strictly tied to the salt water of the Mediterranean Sea. If you were a sailor on the open ocean, you might pray to a Nereid. But if you were a farmer hoping for your crops to grow, or a traveler desperate for a drink, your plea would be to an Oceanid. Their domain was the water that sustains life, the water that flows from the earth to nourish it. As minor goddesses, their power was local, tied to their specific spring or stream, but it was profound. They oversaw the growth of plants, provided for animals, and offered refreshment and purification to all who approached their waters with respect. To stand by a clear stream in the ancient world was to stand in the presence of a goddess, to feel her nurturing power flowing right before your eyes. 3,000 daughters is a number that feels almost impossible to grasp. It is more than a simple family tree. It is a poetic declaration of abundance. For the ancient Greeks, this number was not a literal head count of individual nymphs, but a breathtaking metaphor. It was their way of saying that the sources of freshwater were truly countless. Picture the entire known world, from the rocky coasts of Greece to the distant shores of Egypt and the mysterious lands to the east. Now imagine every single one of the springs, every stream, every river that brought life to that landscape. Each one of those points of water glowing on the map was an Oceanid. This vast number was a testament to the generosity of the earth itself. It meant that no matter where you traveled, no matter how harsh the terrain, the possibility of life-sustaining water was always present, guarded by a divine presence. The number 3,000 was a symbol of hope, a promise that the world was not a barren rock, but a living being crisscrossed with veins of freshwater, each with its own spirit. This concept transforms our understanding of the ancient landscape from a simple map into a living, breathing network of divine power. So what did it mean for a mortal to live in such a world where every sip of water was a gift from a goddess? Among these 3,000 sisters, a few rose to prominence, their names echoing through the myths with power and influence. The most formidable of them all was Styx. She was not merely the goddess of a river, she was the goddess of the river Styx itself, the legendary boundary between the world of the living and the underworld. Her dark, swirling waters were the most sacred substance in the cosmos, so potent that they became the very instrument of unbreakable oaths. When a god needed to swear a vow of ultimate importance, Iris, the messenger goddess, would fly to fetch a golden cup of water from the Styx. The god would pour it out while speaking their oath, and from that moment the vow was irrevocable. To break an oath sworn on the Styx meant facing a terrible punishment, even for an Olympian. They would be struck with a paralysis so complete they would lie breathless and unmoving for an entire great year, cut off from the nectar and ambrosia that sustained their immortality, followed by 9 full years of exile from the divine council. Styx's power, therefore, was the bedrock of divine law and order, a fearsome authority held by an Oceanid. Another prominent sister was Doris, whose name means bounty. She embodied the rich gifts of the sea and became the wife of the old sea god Nereus. Together, they became the parents of the 50 Nereids, the graceful nymphs of the Mediterranean. This makes Doris the vital link, the grandmother figure, connecting the vast freshwater network of the Oceanids to the powerful saltwater realm of the Nereids. Through her, the lineages of water are woven together. Then there was Electra, one of the 7 famous Pleiades star nymphs, whose light forms the constellation we still see today. She was an Oceanid who married the Titan Atlas, the one who holds up the sky, and bore him 2 sons who would found the great Trojan bloodline. Her story shows how the influence of the Oceanids extended from the deepest springs of the earth to the very stars in the heavens, their family ties binding together the entire cosmic order. These 3 sisters alone demonstrate that the Oceanids were not just background figures, but central pillars in the architecture of myth, their lives intertwined with the fates of gods, heroes, and kingdoms. What other roles did these powerful nymphs play in the great dramas of gods and mortals? Beyond the pillars of law and lineage, other Oceanids shaped the world through wisdom and motherhood. Metis, whose name means cunning wisdom, was a Titaness in her own right, a counselor whose intelligence surpassed all others. She was Zeus's first wife, a crucial ally in his war against his father, the Titan Kronos. It was Metis who devised the cunning plan, who provided the emetic drug that forced Kronos to disgorge the children he had swallowed, freeing Zeus's siblings and securing their victory. But after this triumph, a terrifying prophecy emerged, foretelling that Metis would bear a son who would one day overthrow Zeus, just as he had overthrown his own father. To prevent this fate, Zeus resorted to the same cruel deception his father had used. When Metis was pregnant with their first child, he coaxed her into transforming into a fly, and then in a single, shocking act, he swallowed her whole. He believed he had contained the threat, but the wisdom of Metis could not be so easily extinguished. She remained alive within him, forever weaving counsel and strategy in the depths of his mind. And from that divine union, their daughter was born not from Metis's womb, but from Zeus's own head, springing forth fully grown and clad in battle armor. That daughter was Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, a living testament to the enduring power of her mother, an Oceanid who, even in captivity, shaped the very mind of the king of the gods. Then there was Clymene, a name meaning famous strength. She married the Titan Iapetus, and together they became the parents of some of the most pivotal figures in all of mythology. Their sons were Prometheus, the cunning Titan who stole fire for humanity, and Atlas, the colossal being condemned to hold up the sky for eternity. Through her children, Clymene's influence flows directly into the 2 greatest stories of the ancient world, the story of human civilization ignited by fire, and the story of cosmic order upheld by unbearable strength. And we cannot forget Asia, an Oceanid whose legacy is written across our maps. She was the wife of the Titan Prometheus in some accounts, and her name was so powerful, so evocative of the lands to the east, that the entire continent of Asia bears it to this day. She is a reminder that these nymphs were not just characters in stories, but the perceived spirits of the world itself, their identities woven into the very geography that the ancient Greeks knew and explored. Each of these sisters, from the swallowed Metis to the continent naming Asia, proves that the Oceanids were fundamental to the creation of the world as the Greeks understood it, their stories flowing into the bedrock of myth, culture, and even the names of our earth. But the waters of the Oceanids were not always nurturing and life-giving. Some of their number presided over currents of a far more chilling nature, flowing in the sunless realm beneath the earth. The very same elemental power that quenched thirst and made flowers bloom also guided the final journey of every mortal soul. These were the Oceanids of the underworld, and their rivers defined the landscape of the afterlife. First, there was Acron, the river of woe. This was not a simple stream, but a vast, murky expanse of water, often depicted as a desolate marsh. It was the primary boundary that the newly dead had to cross. The souls of the deceased would gather on its bleak shores, waiting for the grim ferryman, Charon, to pole his boat across its dark waters. To make this passage, a soul needed a coin placed in their mouth at burial, the fare for Charon. Those who were not properly buried were condemned to wander the misty banks of the Acron for 100 years, their mournful cries adding to the river's eternal sorrow. The Acrausia swamp, fed by this river, was a place of pure, undiluted grief, its very essence a lament for all that was lost. Then flowed the Cocytus, the river of lamentation. If Acron was a wide marsh of collective sorrow, Cocytus was a river of active, vocal anguish. Its name means wailing, and its waters were said to be formed entirely from the countless tears shed by the dead for their past lives and for those they left behind. The sound it made was not a gentle splash, but a constant, chilling chorus of sobs and cries. In some later myths, this frozen river became the final prison for the very worst sinners, a pit of icy despair at the very bottom of the underworld. But its core identity remained the river of unending grief, a tangible flow of the regret that haunted the afterlife. Most haunting of all was the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. After a soul had been judged and assigned its place in the afterlife, it was led to this tranquil, gentle stream. To drink from the waters of Lethe was to have every memory of one's earthly life, every joy and every pain utterly and peacefully erased. This was not a punishment, but a form of mercy, a final release from the burdens of identity and consciousness before a soul was sent to be reborn into a new life. Imagine standing on the brink of that quiet water, knowing that a single sip would dissolve the memory of every person you ever loved, every place you ever called home, every triumph and failure that made you who you are. The power of this Oceanid was absolute, offering the profound and terrifying gift of oblivion. These three sisters, Acron, Cocytus, and Lethe, were essential guides in the soul's final transformation. They were not monsters of torment, but divine administrators of a necessary process, their dark waters performing the sacred duties of passage, purification, and final rest. Yet for all their cosmic importance, the true heart of the Oceanid story was found not in grand myths, but in the quiet, daily lives of ordinary people. Across the sun-drenched hills of Greece and throughout the Mediterranean, nearly every community lived in the presence of a local goddess. A farmer guiding his oxen to a shaded pool, a young woman filling her clay jar at a public fountain, a traveler kneeling to drink from a roadside spring. Each of these simple acts was a potential encounter with the divine. The belief was not that a distant Oceanid occasionally visited these waters, but that the water itself was the goddess. A particular spring in a secluded valley was not just a home for a nymph, it was the physical body of that nymph. Her health and mood were directly reflected in the water's clarity, its constant flow, and its life-giving properties. If the spring ran dry or became fouled, it was a sign the nymph had withdrawn her favor, a disaster for the village that depended on her. This intimate connection forged a powerful form of local worship, a religion of gratitude and supplication that sustained entire communities. To ensure the water kept flowing and the crops grew tall, people would leave simple, heartfelt offerings at the water's edge. A piece of honey cake, a few drops of wine poured onto the damp earth, or a small, hand-formed clay figurine might be placed carefully near the source. These were not bribes for the gods, but gifts of respect, a way of saying thank you and please continue. In time, these spots of devotion often became formalized. A community might build a small, open-air shrine, a simple stone enclosure around the spring, or perhaps a niche carved into the rock face where the water emerged. These were not grand temples like the Parthenon, but humble, sacred spaces that made the invisible goddess tangible. To pour a libation at such a shrine was to participate in an ancient covenant between humanity and the earth, a direct plea to the nurturing power that made life possible. The survival of the village, its children, and its flocks all hinged on maintaining a good relationship with this one local Oceanid. Her well-being was their well-being. This deep, localized faith reveals a world alive with spirit, where every sip of water was a sacred communion. When the cosmos itself was torn apart by the Titanomachy, the great war that pitted the old gods against the new, the 3,000 Oceanids faced a terrible choice. Their father, the great river Oceanus, made a decision that would define their legacy for eternity. He declared his neutrality, while his Titan brothers like Kronos and Iapetus rallied to fight the uprising led by Zeus. Oceanus refused to take up arms. This was not an act of cowardice, but a profound and calculated strategy rooted in his unique nature. He was the fundamental boundary of the world, the river that encircled all existence. To enter the war would be to risk the stability of the cosmos itself. His wife Tethys, in a move of brilliant foresight, went a step further. She offered to raise and protect Hera, Zeus's own sister and future wife, within their watery domain. This act of guardianship was a powerful gesture of goodwill, a diplomatic masterstroke that built a bridge to the rising Olympian power. The vast majority of the Oceanids, loyal to their father's decree, followed this path of non-intervention. They continued their sacred work, tending to the rivers and springs of the earth, remaining the steady, life-giving pulse of the world while chaos raged above. Their neutrality was a declaration that some powers were too fundamental to be drawn into the conflicts of kings, that the water which sustains all life must remain above the fray. When the dust settled and the Olympians stood victorious atop Mount Olympus, this strategic choice proved its worth. Zeus and his siblings, now the new rulers of the universe, did not punish Oceanus and his daughters. They could not afford to. The world needed the freshwater the Oceanids provided. Their power was not based on martial strength or political allegiance, but on an elemental necessity. So, while the other Titans were cast into the dark pit of Tartarus, the Oceanids kept their positions, their sacred groves, and their divine authority over the world's waters. They became a living bridge between the old order and the new, their quiet, persistent flow a testament to a power that outlasts even the fall of gods. Styx understood the tides of power were shifting. While her father Oceanus remained neutral, she made a different, decisive choice. She was the first of the ancient deities to openly side with Zeus and his Olympians in their war against the Titans, bringing her 4 powerful children with her. Her allegiance was a turning point, a gift of immense strategic value. In gratitude for her support, Zeus bestowed upon her unparalleled honors. Her name became the very word for the most unbreakable vow a god could swear. Her children, Zelos, Nike, Krotos, and Bia, were given permanent positions at his side. Their names translate to rivalry, victory, power, and force, and they became the personified enforcers of Zeus's will. You could say that Zeus's ultimate authority was literally flanked by the children of an Oceanid. Nike, as the goddess of victory, was especially revered, her image appearing on monuments and coins for centuries as a symbol of divine favor. This was not a simple alliance, it was a complete integration of Styx's line into the very heart of the new regime. Her story demonstrates that some Oceanids were not passive beneficiaries of their father's diplomacy, but active and ambitious architects of their own fate. Their support provided Zeus with something he desperately needed: legitimacy from the old order and a claim to the fundamental powers of the cosmos. This ensured that the lineage of Styx would be forever honored, their influence flowing directly into the throne room of Olympus. But what of the other sisters? How did the rest of the 3,000 navigate this new world? The answer lies in their elemental necessity. Zeus could conquer the Titans, but he could not command the rivers to flow or the springs to bubble forth. The Olympians needed the Oceanids just as much as mortals did, so the new gods absorbed the old water spirits into their own myths and families. Many Oceanids, like Electra and Doris, were already woven into the fabric of the ruling families through marriage. Others became the wives of great river gods or the mothers of heroic founders of cities. Their presence provided a divine continuity that soothed the transition from one age to the next. They were the living memory of the world before Olympus, a reminder that while kings and gods may fall, the waters that give life are eternal. This deep, mutual dependence meant the Oceanids did not just survive the regime change, they became an indispensable part of its foundation, their quiet power flowing unchallenged into the new age. A mortal's relationship with an Oceanid was a delicate balance of reverence and fear. These goddesses were the source of all life, yet their favor was not given unconditionally. For the communities that depended on them, an Oceanid was the ultimate nurturer. Her clear, cool water was not just for drinking. It was the water that nourished the crops in the field, the olives on the trees, and the grapes on the vine. It was the water used to wash a newborn child, to cleanse a wound, or to purify a home. A reliable spring meant a thriving village, and that steady, generous flow was seen as the goddess's constant blessing, a daily act of divine care. To honor this gift, people maintained a sacred cleanliness around these water sources. A spring was not a place to wash clothes or clean tools. It was a sanctuary kept pristine out of respect for the spirit who lived there. This was the covenant, a simple and profound agreement. The nymph gives life and humanity offers respect in return. But what happened when that respect was broken? The other side of their nature was swift and terrifying. If someone polluted a sacred spring, if they defiled it with dirt or blood or simply took its water without a word of thanks, the consequence was not a simple scolding. It was divine retribution. The same water that healed could now bring disease. The spring might suddenly run dry or its waters turn bitter, poisoning the land and the people. The offended Oceanid could inflict a sudden madness, a wasting sickness, or a blight upon the family of the one who wronged her. Consider the harrowing story of Alcmaeon. After he murdered his own mother, the Furies, the spirits of vengeance, began to hunt him. He fled across Greece seeking purification, and eventually found a temporary refuge on a river island formed by silt from the river Achelous. He married the river god's daughter and believed himself safe, but the land itself was cursed for him as it had been part of his mother's dominion. Driven from this new home, he wandered again until he came to the springs of the Nymphs. He did not know that these very springs had been created when his mother's nurse wept tears of grief for the murdered woman. When he drank from that water, he was not taking a refreshing drink. He was consuming the very essence of his own crime. The water, imbued with the sorrow and rage of his mother's memory, turned against him. The local nymphs, acting as agents of a deeper cosmic justice, did not offer him solace. Instead, they drove him into a raving, violent madness, a final, fitting punishment for his unspeakable act. His story is a stark lesson. The Oceanids were not passive fountains. They were conscious, powerful beings who upheld the natural and moral order. Their wrath was as elemental as their generosity, a reminder that the forces which give life also demand absolute respect. The romantic lives of the Oceanids wove a vast genealogical tapestry, connecting the divine family to every corner of the known world. These unions were far more than simple love stories. They were the myths the ancient Greeks used to explain their own place in a wider world, linking foreign lands and peoples back to their own pantheon through the fluid bloodlines of the water nymphs. The foundational marriage was, of course, that of Tethys and Oceanus. Theirs was the primordial bond from which all others flowed, a cosmic partnership so stable and enduring that it became the one Titan marriage never troubled by infidelity or strife. They represented the perfect, harmonious union of saltwater and freshwater, the two essential forces that together sustain all life. This set a powerful precedent, making the Oceanids themselves ideal brides, symbols of fertile and life-giving connections. When an Oceanid married, she did not just join a family, she brought the nourishing power of fresh water with her. A perfect example of this is the story of Clymene, an Oceanid who married the Egyptian king Belus. In the Greek imagination, Belus was the legendary father of Aegyptus and Danaus, the progenitors of the Egyptian and Danide peoples. Through this union, Clymene became a royal ancestor, her freshwater lineage mingling with a foreign royal house to explain the origins of a great civilization to the south. Her children were seen as the bridges between Greece and Egypt, their stories justifying ancient ties and conflicts. Another Oceanid, Eurynome, alongside her sister Tethys, was one of the great nurturing goddesses who raised the infant Hera. She later became the third wife of Zeus and bore him the three Charites or Graces named Aglaia, Euphrosyne, and Thalia. These goddesses personified beauty, joy, and festivity, the very charms that make life worth living. Through Eurynome, the Oceanids gave Olympus its grace and elegance, its capacity for delight. Even the mighty god of the forge, Hephaestus, was linked to an Oceanid. Some traditions name an Oceanid named Clymene as his wife, though others call her Cabero. This connection tied the elemental power of fire, which Hephaestus controlled, to the nourishing power of water, a union of fundamental forces that mirrored his parents' own marriage. Perhaps the most poignant of these mortal entanglements was that of the Oceanid Aegina. The god Zeus fell in love with her and carried her off to the island of Onan. Their union produced a son, Aeacus, who grew to be a man of such immense piety that the gods themselves appointed him as one of the three judges of the dead in the underworld. The island itself was renamed Aegina in his mother's honor. In this single myth, an Oceanid gives her name to a place, becomes the mother of a revered hero and judge, and connects her watery origins to the ultimate justice of the afterlife. These stories were the connective tissue of the ancient worldview. A Greek traveler arriving in Egypt or on the island of Aegina could look at the local people and their rulers and see not strangers but distant cousins, descendants of a shared Oceanid ancestress. The romantic myths of these 3,000 sisters were in essence a divine map of the Mediterranean, charting both geography and kinship through the timeless flow of water and blood. The gentle murmur of a spring was the first rhythm ancient poets ever knew. It is no surprise, then, that the Oceanids flowed so powerfully into the very heart of Greek poetry and song, becoming immortal muses for the creators who sought to capture their elusive beauty. Their most famous appearance comes from the very dawn of Western literature in Hesiod's Theogony. This epic poem, a grand attempt to chart the entire genealogy of the gods, pauses its cosmic narrative to deliver a breathtaking catalogue of the Oceanids. Hesiod lists name after beautiful name, not as a dry inventory but as a poetic incantation. He names Pytho, persuasion, and Electra, the amber shining one. He calls upon Plauto, wealth, and Calypso, the hidden one. This list was far more than a divine roll call. It was a demonstration of the world's boundless variety, a way of saying that every facet of nature and human experience, from persuasion to abundance, had a divine, watery origin in an Oceanid. For the poet, the endless variety of these 3,000 sisters became the perfect metaphor for creativity itself. Just as a river has an infinite number of droplets and currents, so too did the well of inspiration have limitless forms. A poet staring at a blank scroll was like a traveler in a dry land, waiting for the divine spark, the touch of a muse, to make the words flow like a sacred spring. This connection was made visible on countless pieces of ancient pottery and in the delicate illustrations on scrolls. Artists depicted these nymphs as graceful, draped figures, often pouring water from a jug or dancing in a lush, watery landscape. They were not shown as fearsome deities, but as embodiments of natural beauty and artistic inspiration. Seeing their images on a drinking cup or a ceremonial vase brought their presence into daily life, a constant reminder that creativity was a divine gift, as essential and life-giving as water itself. Their cultural importance, therefore, stretched far beyond the boundaries of religious ritual. They were the spiritual partners of the artist, the silent collaborators in every song sung and every poem composed. To invoke an Oceanid was to tap into the primordial source of all that was fluid, graceful, and ever new. Yet the Oceanids never flowed alone. For every freshwater spring embodied by a sister, there was a thundering river given voice by a brother. The 3,000 Oceanids were matched by 3,000 Potamoi, the river gods, and together this colossal family formed the complete circulatory system of the ancient world. Imagine a single, massive river flowing from its source in the mountains. The spring where it first bubbles from the earth is the domain of an Oceanid, a quiet, nurturing presence. But as that trickle gathers strength, merging with other streams to carve a path through the landscape, its spirit transforms into a Potamos, a powerful, often bearded male deity who personifies the river's full, roaring force. This was the essential partnership. The Oceanids governed the sources, the hidden origins of water deep within the earth, while their brothers, the Potamoi, commanded the mighty, visible channels that carried that water across the continents. One group provided the essence, the other the delivery. A single water cycle, from its silent birth in a cavern to its thundering journey to the sea, was a continuous family affair, a perfect collaboration between sister and brother. This division of labor meant that no water on Earth, from the smallest dewdrop to the widest estuary, existed outside the control of Oceanus and Tethys' children. Their domain was not just vast, it was perfectly complete. The most famous of these river gods was Oceanus, often depicted as a mighty bull with a man's bearded face, whose wrestling match with the hero Heracles for the hand of the Princess Deianira became a legendary myth. But for every famous Potamos like Oceanus or the Egyptian Nile, there were thousands of local river gods, each with his own name and personality, revered by the towns and cities that grew along his banks. A community's relationship with its local Potamos was just as vital as its bond with a spring nymph. They would offer sacrifices to appease his tempestuous nature during floods and pray to him for life-giving water during a drought. This divine sibling network ensured the world's water was never an anonymous resource, but a family of gods working in harmonious, predictable rhythm. The quiet prayer offered to an Oceanid at her source was answered by the thundering passage of her brother, carrying her gift to the world. This compassion found its most poignant expression when a helpless infant fell from the heavens. The newborn Hephaestus, the future god of the forge, was said to be so weak or disfigured at birth that his mother, Hera, in a moment of shame or rage, hurled him from the peaks of Mount Olympus. He tumbled through the vast air for a full day and night before crashing into the waves of the Great Sea. But he did not drown. Instead, he was caught by the gentle currents and carried to the shore where two Oceanids, Tethys and Eurynome, discovered the broken child. These sister goddesses did not turn away. They took the outcast into their own underwater grotto, a secret cave lined with coral and pearls, and for 9 full years they became his nurses, his protectors, and his first family. In the quiet, nurturing sanctuary of their waters, they mended his body and spirit. This was not a temporary rescue, it was a profound act of rearing that shaped the very core of his divine identity. While they cared for him, Hephaestus began to discover his own genius. Surrounded by the treasures of the deep, he started crafting exquisite jewelry from shells and precious metals, his first tentative acts of creation born directly from the safety they provided. The story of Hephaestus is a testament to the Oceanids' most fundamental power, the power of restorative care. Just as a polluted spring could bring sickness, a pure, protected spring could heal. The water they embodied did not merely quench thirst, it washed wounds, it soothed fevers, and it offered a place of refuge for the broken and abandoned. Their domain was a natural infirmary, a sacred space where life could be restored away from the harsh judgments of the world above. This protective instinct extended beyond a single god. Many myths tell of Oceanids raising other divine children, like Hera herself, who was sheltered by Tethys. They were the universal nurses of mythology, their waters providing the elemental cradle where the young and vulnerable could grow strong. Their compassion was as essential to the cosmic order as the unbreakable oaths of Styx, for what is a world that creates life but does not protect it? The gentle, persistent flow of a spring does not discriminate, it offers its gift to all who come to it in need. A river of stars flows overhead, mirroring the waters below. The Greeks saw the same divine patterns in the constellations that they found in their own forests and mountains, a celestial reflection of their world. The Oceanids were not confined to the earth, for their family reached directly into the night sky. The most famous of these celestial nymphs was the star cluster known as the Pleiades. These 7 sisters, immortalized as a glittering knot of stars in the constellation Taurus, were the daughters of the Titan Atlas and the Oceanid Pleione. Among them shone Electra, an Oceanid whose light was said to be the dimmest of her sisters because she hid her face in grief when her son, Dardanus, founded the city of Troy and its line met with such tragic fates. To look up at the Pleiades was to see a family of Oceanids, their story written in starlight. But the celestial connections did not end there. The constellation Hyades, whose rising marked the coming of rain in the ancient world, were also nymphs, the rain-bringing sisters of the Pleiades. Their placement in the heavens directly linked the appearance of certain stars to the seasonal rains that would replenish the very springs and rivers the Oceanids governed on earth. This was not a coincidence to the Greek mind, it was a divine circuit. The same elemental force that welled up from the ground also fell from the sky, and both were expressions of the same cosmic family. The Milky Way itself, that vast, luminous smear across the darkness, was sometimes imagined as a celestial extension of Oceanus, the great river that encircled the world. This worldview wove the universe into a single, seamless tapestry. A farmer drawing water from a spring was touching the same essential power that a sailor used to navigate by the stars. The water in his jar and the light in the sky were kin, different expressions of a cosmos alive with interconnected spirit. The heavens were not a cold, distant void, but a vibrant, hydrated map of myth and meaning. How many other stories are written above us, waiting to be read in the silent language of the constellations? 2 goddesses of the sea, yet one ruled the sun-drenched waves and the other the hidden springs. The Nereids, 50 daughters of the old sea god Nereus and the Oceanid Doris, were the graceful spirits of the Mediterranean. They were a chorus of the sea itself, seen dancing in the foam of a cresting wave or riding the backs of dolphins through the open ocean. Their world was one of salt and sun, of sailors' prayers and the vast blue expanse. The Oceanids, in stark contrast, were a legion of 3,000, born from the primordial titans of all water. Their domain was the land itself, every river and every spring that brought life from within the earth. The Nereids were the spirits you encountered on a journey across the sea, while the Oceanids were the deities you thanked for the water in your cup. This fundamental difference in their nature is perfectly captured in their most famous members. For the Nereids, that was Tethys, the mother of Achilles. She was a goddess deeply involved in the affairs of heroes, a shape-shifting power of the sea who tried to protect her mortal son. For the Oceanids, the ultimate representative was Styx, the dread river of the underworld whose waters sealed the most sacred oaths of the gods themselves. Tethys intervened in human destiny while Styx enforced cosmic law. Their numbers tell the final part of the story. The 50 Nereids represent the known navigable seas, a number that could be counted and named. The 3,000 Oceanids symbolize the countless, life-giving sources of freshwater that covered the known world, a number so vast it was a declaration of the Earth's abundance. One family governed the mysterious, traversable deep, while the other embodied the essential, nurturing pulse of the land itself. The murmuring of a spring was more than just a soothing sound to the ancient Greeks. It was a potential whisper from the gods themselves. Water, with its hidden sources, its unpredictable flow, and its reflective surface, was seen as a natural conduit to knowledge beyond human sight. This belief transformed certain springs, those inhabited by prophetic Oceanids, into revered oracles. One such figure was the Oceanid Melina, whose name means the black or dark one. She was intimately linked to one of the most eerie and powerful oracular sites in all of Greece, the Oracle of Trophonius. This was not a place for simple questions. Located near the town of Lebedea, the oracle was a deep, dark chasm in the earth, a terrifying subterranean cavern. Before any seeker could descend into that primal darkness to receive a vision from the hero Trophonius, they had to undergo a series of elaborate rituals. A crucial part of this purification involved drinking from two special springs. The first was called Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, and its waters were meant to wash away the seeker's current worries and preconceptions, clearing their mind for the revelation to come. The second spring was named Mnemosyne for memory. After drinking from this one, the seeker would be able to remember the often terrifying and cryptic vision they received underground. The spring of Mnemosyne at this powerful site was the sacred domain of the Oceanid Melina. Her dark waters were not for quenching physical thirst, but for preparing the soul. To drink from her spring was to receive the gift of indelible memory, to be able to carry the hidden knowledge of the underworld back into the light of day. She was the guardian of the threshold, the one who made sure the oracle's message was not lost. This connection between water and prophecy was deeply logical to the ancient mind. A spring emerges from a place you cannot see, from the hidden depths of the earth, just as prophetic knowledge emerges from the unseen future. The babbling of a brook over stones sounded like a coded language, and the way water reflected the sky made it a natural mirror into other realms. An Oceanid, as the conscious spirit of that water, was therefore the interpreter of these divine murmurs. Her spring was not just a location, it was an active portal, and her favor determined whether a seeker received a clear vision or was left in bewildering darkness. But the same waters that could heal and inspire also held a capacity for a chilling, unforgiving wrath. While many Oceanids were nurturing figures, their sacred groves were places of absolute law, and to violate that sanctity was to invite a curse as elemental as the water itself. Their vengeance was not a petty emotion, but the natural consequence of a cosmic balance being upset. A stark example of this darker aspect unfolds in the tragic fate of the nymphs who attended the goddess Persephone. Before her abduction by Hades, Persephone was a radiant maiden, and she was not alone in her mother Demeter's flowering meadows. A group of Oceanids, her chosen companions, danced and sang with her, their laughter mingling with the sound of bubbling springs. On the day Hades emerged from a chasm in the earth to claim his bride, the world shattered in an instant. As he carried the screaming Persephone into the underworld, her Oceanid companions stood frozen in terror. They did nothing. They failed to raise an alarm. They failed to fight back. They failed in their most sacred duty as her friends and protectors. For this failure, they were punished with a transformation as cruel as it was fitting. The goddess Demeter, in her boundless grief and rage, or in some accounts the goddess Aphrodite, changed them into the first sirens. These were not the beautiful, alluring women of later tales, but monstrous creatures, part bird and part woman, condemned to perch on rocky islands for all eternity. Their beautiful singing voices, once used for joy, were twisted into an irresistible, deadly lure for passing sailors. Their song became a weapon of vengeance against all mankind, a perpetual punishment for their one moment of paralyzing fear. This myth adds a profound layer of tragedy to the Oceanid nature. It shows that their perceived gentleness could be shattered, and that their role in the cosmic order came with terrible responsibilities. To fail in their duties, even out of fear, was to be remade into a symbol of peril, their own essence turned against them. They became a warning that the spirits of the natural world demand not just respect but active courage, and that the price of failure was a loss of self, forever bound to the consequences of a single, fateful mistake. Hesiod's voice echoes across the centuries, preserved in the crisp lines of his Theogony, and it is here we find the most definitive roll call of the Oceanids ever recorded. In the midst of his grand chronicle of cosmic births and divine struggles, the poet offers a breathtaking pause, a catalogue of names that feels less like a list and more like an incantation. He recites them one after another, a rhythmic flow of identities that mirrors the endless streams they represent. This was not merely an attempt to inventory 3,000 goddesses, but a profound poetic device. In an oral culture, such lists served as mnemonic anchors, helping the bard and his audience hold the vastness of the divine world in memory. Each name was a hook, a sparkling droplet in the great river of myth, ensuring the legacy of these nymphs would not be forgotten. Listen to the names he gives us, for they are keys to understanding their essence. He speaks of Pytho, whose name means persuasion. She was the divine force that flowed through compelling speech and the gentle, irresistible currents of influence that bind societies together. Then comes Plauto, whose name translates simply to wealth. She was not the goddess of gold coins, but of the true riches of the ancient world, the fertile soil made fruitful by her waters, the abundant harvests that meant the difference between life and starvation. There is Calypso, the Hidden One, a name that evokes secluded, sheltered springs and the mysteries they contain. Electra shines with a gleam of amber, a luminous presence. And Doris, the Bounty, embodies the generous gifts of the water itself. Each name is a direct link to a function, a sphere of influence that touches every aspect of life, from the social to the agricultural, from the visible to the deeply concealed. Hesiod's catalogue transforms the Oceanids from a faceless multitude into a detailed mosaic of divine patronage. Through his words, we understand that to know their names was to understand the very structure of the world, where every form of natural and social abundance had a freshwater source and a goddess who personified it. Their constant, gentle flow was the ancient world's greatest symbol for life itself. The Oceanids were far more than just characters in a story. They were living allegories for the most fundamental forces that shape our existence. Their very essence was a poetic representation of fertility, purity, and the ceaseless, interconnected journey that every living thing must take. Think of a single river, from its source as a mountain spring to its final merging with the sea. That journey is a perfect mirror for a human life, full of different phases and landscapes. The Oceanid at the source is the spark of beginnings, the pure potential of birth. As the water flows, it nourishes the land, just as our lives touch and sustain others. And finally, the river reaches the ocean, a return to the vast and collective whole, just as all lives eventually return to the elements from which they came. This is why these nymphs were seen as the ultimate nurturers. Their water made the seeds sprout, the lambs grow strong, and the children thrive. This nurturing power made them symbols of motherhood on a cosmic scale, not just for a single child, but for all of creation. Their care was the model for the ideal mother, endlessly giving, patient, and essential. Their purity was not just about clean water, but about moral and spiritual clarity. A sacred spring was a place where you could wash away not just physical dirt, but also guilt and pollution, a concept the Greeks called miasma. To approach an Oceanid spring was to seek a fresh start, a return to a state of innocence and grace. But perhaps their most profound lesson was one of connection. A single raindrop falling on a mountain might seep into the earth and become part of a hidden spring, an Oceanid's domain. That same water would then flow into a river, be drunk by a traveler, evaporate into the sky, and fall again as rain 100 miles away. The Oceanids embodied this endless, interwoven cycle. They taught that no spring, no river, no life is truly isolated. Every source is linked to every other, and a disturbance in one place can ripple through the entire system. This ancient understanding feels remarkably modern today. It is a reminder that our own lives are part of a vast, flowing network, that our actions have consequences that travel far beyond our immediate sight, and that the forces which give us life demand our deepest respect and care in return. The timeless murmur of a spring did not fall silent at the borders of Greece. As the Roman Empire absorbed the gods and myths of the Hellenistic world, the 3,000 Oceanids underwent a subtle but profound transformation, their distinct identities flowing into the broader Roman concept of the Naiad. In Rome, the term Naiad became a general classification for all freshwater nymphs, a single name that encompassed the myriad spirits of springs, fountains, and rivers. The grand, cosmic lineage of Oceanus and Tethys faded into the background, replaced by a more practical and localized Roman view of divinity. Yet the fundamental human impulse, the need to see a living spirit in the water that sustained daily life, remained as strong as ever. The Romans, even more than the Greeks, were master hydraulic engineers, building monumental aqueducts to channel water across vast distances. But for all their engineering prowess, their spiritual connection to the source of that water never diminished. Every public fountain in Rome, every rural spring in the countryside, was still understood to be the home of Aeneas. These Roman water spirits inherited the same roles as the Oceanids before them. They were the nurturers of crops, the healers of ailments, and the protectors of their specific, assigned place. A traveler offering a coin to a roadside fountain was performing the same act of devotion as a Greek farmer leaving a honey cake at a spring, a direct continuation of that ancient covenant between humanity and the freshwater world. This seamless transition from the Greek Oceanid to the Roman Naiad proves that the cult of these water spirits was never truly about their specific names or genealogies. It was about a universal, human response to the miracle of fresh water emerging from the earth. The Roman Naiads were the Oceanids in a new cultural dialect, their essence unchanged. They answered the same deep-seated need to personify the forces of nature, to give a face and a name to the invisible power that made life possible, ensuring that the sacred springs of the world never lost their divine voices. Their echoes ripple through our modern world, surfacing in the most unexpected places. The name Oceanid, born in ancient poetry, now labels a genus of delicate freshwater crabs scuttling along riverbeds far from Greece. These small creatures carry the legacy of the 3,000 sisters in their very biology, a scientific tribute to the enduring link between freshwater and life. This is not a coincidence, but a testament to the power of myth to name and explain the natural world long before the advent of modern science. The mythic impulse that saw a goddess in every spring now finds its expression in the Latin names we give to newly discovered species, forever weaving the old stories into the fabric of our understanding. But the true resurgence of the Oceanids flows through the vibrant currents of contemporary pop culture. They have been reborn in blockbuster video games where they appear as powerful water elementals, bosses commanding torrents and tides with the same primal authority their mythic counterparts held over ancient springs. In fantasy literature, authors summon their name to evoke a sense of ancient aquatic mystery, attaching it to graceful, powerful beings who guard sacred pools or possess oracular wisdom. These modern reinterpretations may take creative liberties, yet they capture the essential spirit of the Oceanids, their connection to the nurturing yet untamable power of water. Why does this specific myth continue to resonate so deeply? It is because the fundamental human experiences they represent have not changed. We still depend on fresh water for our survival. We still feel a sense of peace and wonder standing by a clear, flowing stream. The Oceanids give a name and a face to that universal feeling, transforming a biological necessity into a story of divine care and elemental force. Their lasting power proves that the oldest stories are often the most vital, capable of being retold in 1,000 different ways because they speak to something permanent within us. The next time you see a water spirit in a game or read their name in a novel, remember you are witnessing a myth that is thousands of years old, still flowing, still capturing the human imagination as powerfully as ever. Their quiet power was the invisible engine of the entire Greek cosmos. While Zeus hurled thunderbolts and heroes won glory, the Oceanids performed the sacred, ceaseless labor that made all other deeds possible. They were the essential infrastructure of the mythic world, the divine utility that kept reality functioning. Picture the grand stage of Olympus with its dramas and conflicts. Every actor on that stage, from the mightiest god to the lowest mortal, relied on a single, non-negotiable resource, fresh water. And that water had a name and a consciousness, and it was an Oceanid. Without their constant, nurturing flow, the world of Greek myth would have quite literally dried up and blown away. There would be no ambrosia for the gods, for even divine food requires water to grow. There would be no cities for heroes to defend, because no human settlement could last more than a few days without a reliable spring. There would be no flocks for shepherds to tend, no vineyards for Dionysus to bless, no forests for Artemis to roam. The entire vibrant tapestry of myth rests upon the simple, profound fact of freshwater and the 3,000 goddesses who personified it. Their role went beyond mere sustenance. Who raised the infant Hephaestus when he was cast out? Who sheltered the young Hera, future queen of the gods? The Oceanids were the divine foster system, the nurturing force that stabilized the often chaotic and violent family of the gods. They provided the continuity that allowed the new Olympian order to take root, offering a bridge of care from the old Titan world to the new. Their influence was not in dramatic interventions, but in the guarantee of stability. A hero might be defined by a single great quest, but an Oceanid was defined by her constant, reliable presence, season after season, century after century. She was the reason a farmer could plant his seeds with hope, the reason a mother could bathe her child without fear. This is why they were so revered in daily life, because their power was not an abstract concept. It was the water in your cup, the health of your child, the lifeblood of your community. The flashy tales of monsters and wars are the glittering surface of the mythic ocean, but the Oceanids were the deep, steady currents that gave that ocean its life and its meaning. From the cosmic river of Oceanus to the hidden springs of the mortal world, the Oceanids have guided us through the very heart of ancient belief. We have met the 3,000 daughters born from the primordial union of salt and fresh water, a legion of goddesses who were the soul of every river, stream, and spring. We witnessed their quiet power, from the nurturing local nymphs who sustained villages to the formidable Styx, whose waters forged the unbreakable oaths of the gods themselves. We saw their compassion in the rescue of Hephaestus and their terrifying wrath in the punishment of those who defiled their sanctity. Their lives wove the world together, connecting the heights of Olympus to the depths of the underworld, and their stories became the poetic language for everything from artistic inspiration to the journey of the soul. The legacy of the Oceanids is far more than a collection of myths. It is a profound reflection of humanity's oldest and most vital relationship, our sacred bond with fresh water. In an age before science could explain the water cycle, these stories gave a face to the miracle of a bubbling spring, transforming a biological necessity into a narrative of divine care and respect. They remind us that the elements which give us life are not merely resources to be used, but forces to be honored. Which of these 3,000 sisters resonated most deeply with you? Was it the unyielding Styx, the wise Metis, or a local nymph whose name is now lost to time? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the depths of mythology, subscribe for more explorations into the ancient stories that still shape our world.